Thanks for joining us. Happy to see you folks that are on here. And for some of you, you may have seen an AquaBlok presentation last year, but I can tell you it's updated and we have some different content. And we still have the same great guest speaker, Andy Durham, and I'll get to introducing him here in a little bit. But I am Bill Murphy. I am the civil engineer for ASP Enterprises and Quick Supply Company and Bowman Construction Supply and Cascade Geosynthetics. So yes, that's right. I work for all four companies, and I do the civil engineering support for our salespeople, but also the training and educational efforts with engineers, landscape architects, contractors, city, county, state, and federal government employees, and other agencies across our 12 states. And let me get in here and make sure I can advance my slides. We do have actually over 12,000 customers now that we're entering into a CRM, and we have well over 40 years experience at most of these locations. Cascade's our newest acquisition. We just been at it with Cascade for a couple of years now, and they're out in the Pacific Northwest, and I'll show that here on the map. So you can see that Cascade works in Oregon. They're based in Portland, Oregon, and Washington, Idaho, and Alaska. And Bowman Construction Supply has 3 locations in Colorado. That should be updated now. Denver, Colorado Springs, and actually in Fort Collins now. And we have 3 locations with ASP Enterprises. It's actually 4, almost 5. And our main offices there for ASP are St. Louis, Kansas City, Omaha. And we also have Wichita, Kansas location that helps us serve Oklahoma. And like I said, I'm in Southern Iowa, which is closest to our parent company of Quick Supply Company in Des Moines. And what do? Well, we do a whole lot of things. And some of you know us primarily from one of these categories. Most of you don't know us from all of them, but we are experts in all of them and even more than what we show here. So I focus most of my efforts in engineering on the stormwater management side of things. But that bleeds over a little bit into the erosion and sediment control for sure, as well as our geosynthetic solutions. I'm really not involved with hardscapes. Only some of our locations have hardscapes, but all of our locations have warehouses and yards and trucks and delivery experts. So we are the one-stop shop for construction site supplies. And that can be everything from seed and mulch to silt fence and some BMPs. You see wattles in there. And we have a lot of rolled products, as I said earlier, with the geotextiles, geosynthetics, our geogrids, erosion control blankets, turf reinforcement mats, and on and on. And some of our locations actually have some drainage products as well. So if you already know your local ASP, Quick Supply, Bowman, or Cascade rep, keep their number handy. At the end of this presentation, I'll share this contact information again. All 4 of those websites are interconnected. So if you're in one, you basically have access to all of them. And we even have 800 numbers listed on the internet there for our locations. And always keep my information handy. I am Bill Murphy. I'm a civil engineer, but I don't stamp and sign plans. So I'm not competing with consultants. I'm just providing tech support to our people. And I stay in direct contact with most of our manufacturers, especially for our engineered products. And I really dig working with people who have creative solutions. And our guest speaker today is Mr. Andy Durham. And I don't have his name or picture up on this slide, but I'm going to hand over remote controls to him and he can unmute himself so he can talk. But I don't have a written biography for Andy. I've just known him for years in our industry. And he has a little bit of bio of himself that he'll share. But he is very good at helping be creative to solve difficult problems. He's a very clear communicator, and he works directly with engineers, contractors, with all of our sales reps, all the above. And I'm pretty excited about some of the projects he's going to show us here today. So with that, Andy, good afternoon to you, and I think you can drive from here.
Thanks, Bill. I assume if you can hear me, then everybody else on the webinar can hear me as well.
Yep, you sound great.
Great. Let me see if I can advance slides here.
You got it.
Okay, good. All right. Well, we're going to talk about AquaBlok today. That's the name of my company and also the name of the product, the trade name, if you will, but we actually call it a bentonite-coated aggregate. So I'm going to go into a little bit of depth into what that is, but we're going to go through these learning objectives, understand the properties of the bentonite-coated aggregate material, and how it's relevant to civil and geotechnical applications. We'll learn about the AquaBlok advantage and some of the geotechnical properties for performance and why we make the product the way that it is. Become familiar with the basic geotechnical applications, which AquaBlock can be an ideal solution. I want to go through where you would find opportunities to use it, and then definitely go through some examples of successful installations and some case studies that Bill alluded to. Just to give you a little bit of background on myself, I'm assuming that we probably have quite a bit of civil engineers on the call. So I had a early career, 14 or 15 years in civil consulting engineering. I'm registered in Florida, but I've also worked in Georgia, North Carolina, and I now live in Ohio. So I've provided consulting engineer for anything from water, wastewater, solid waste, roadway, site, commercial, residential development projects. And then in 2011, I kind of left consulting engineering and went into geosynthetics, erosion control and geosynthetics with a different company. And I've since spent about 8 years in sales and marketing of geosynthetics, geosynthetic erosion control, woven and non-woven geotextiles, geomembranes, all the products that Bill and his group at ASP Quick Supply, Bowman, and Cascade all sell. So I'm very familiar, and they're a really good distributor of these products. I have a brief stint as an owner of a construction install company. We did some pretty unique projects, so I've seen things from the construction side as well. And then came on board in AquaBlock about a year ago, a little less than a year ago, to manage the geotechnical sales for AquaBlock. So I've been kind of on several different sides of the, I guess, the equation here, from the contractor side, the sales side, the engineer side. If you have any questions when this is over, please feel free to reach out to Bill and he can forward those on to me. I'd be happy to work with any of you guys, and keep an eye out for some opportunities that you see when you look through some of these slides, where you might have some projects that AquaBlock could be a good solution for, and then call Bill and his team at the different offices.
Andy, can I chime in with you? You raised a good point, and I'm sorry I didn't say this at the intro, and I also didn't plug AquaBlock's name enough times, but I didn't mention the Q&A. So we don't use chat during these because they pop up and interrupt the presenter, but we do use Q&A. So throughout this presentation, if anybody uses Q&A, we'll have time at the end to answer those, and we'll capture those, and they'll be in writing so that we could send those out when we send out the PDH certificates. So when Andy's done and I do the closing, we'll see if there's any Q&A questions in there, but I'll also remind everyone that we're going to send out a Survey Monkey for all attendees. So all attendees will get one PDH certificate from our company, and we'll share your contact information with Andy and vice versa, and we'll send that out via email afterwards. Thanks, Andy.
Yeah, that's great, Bill. I appreciate that. From being on the civil engineering side, when people would come in and do lunch and learns or presentations, we always like to play Stump the Chump. So if you've got some really difficult questions, unfortunately, you won't get to watch me squirm, but you can at least imagine, you know, how I'm feeling when you ask me a difficult question. I embrace those. So we'll do that at the end. I would appreciate that. So moving on, let's talk a little bit about bentonite, which is the main component of our bentonite-coated aggregate material. Bentonite is a really cool material, formed from the decomposition of volcanic ash millions of years ago, but now over 70% of the world's bentonite resides in deposits that are surface mined in Wyoming. And we source most of our bentonite from the Lovell plant, but we are sourcing sodium bentonite. And sodium bentonite is a really cool material because it can swell up to 16 times its original size and absorb 10 times its weight in water. So remember that as we move on through this presentation about what bentonite can do.
Sorry, I may have taken controls from you, Andy. I
okay.
had to clear off something off the screen, so on the recording it's not showing up. Thank you.
No problem. I got it back, I think. So there's a couple different types of bentonite. Calcium bentonite is not what we're concerned with. That's goes into food products and health and beauty remedies, but sodium bentonite is the magic material. So a lot of different applications for sodium bentonite, used in manufacturing, used in energy and drilling. If you've ever used geosynthetic clay liner, which is a pretty unique geosynthetic made of woven or non-woven geotextile layers stitched together with a layer of sodium bentonite in between, and it can form an impervious liner. And then powdered bentonite in its raw form, if you will, can be used in construction agriculture. And that's what we're going to focus on, is the construction and civil applications for bentonite. But let's talk about bentonite in its raw form first. So bentonite in a powdered form can swell, and it can create an impervious medium, if you will, used in slurry cutoff walls, but it's pretty messy. It can be used to line ponds with, but it usually comes commercially available in 50-pound bags, and that's not fun to use in a pond liner. Can plug wells, but it's pretty messy there. And then it can seal and repair ponds, but I'm not even sure if what that guy's doing in that picture on the bottom left is ever going to work. It's just pouring the sodium bentonite and hope that it gets down to the bottom of the pond. So this is where bentonite kind of falls short, and that's where AquaBlok steps in. So we're bill ourselves as kind of the next level bentonite. What we do is we actually take the powdered sodium bentonite and coat graded aggregate. So this is a number 8 or a number 9 stone, kind of like a pea gravel size and consistency. We use a non-toxic proprietary binder, and voila, we have a composite bentonite aggregate system. So this is coated gravel, and it kind of has the appearance or resemblance of maybe like a chocolate covered peanut, yogurt covered raisin, something like that. You could actually kind of scrape off the bentonite a little bit with your fingernail, and you can see the rock underneath in the center. So that's the consistency of it, but it is a uniform distribution system of bentonite. So we're basically using the stone to deliver the bentonite into places that it wouldn't be able to go if it was just in its powdered form. And it's without the mess. It's self-compacting. So when that bentonite swells, like we talked about, it swells to the inside and it fills the voids of that gravel and creates a self-compacting impervious mass. It's relatively low cost, very flexible, very easy to install, and we'll go through that as a major theme through the rest of the presentation. We can put together custom blends of different concentrations of bentonite for targeted designs. We can vary and control the permeability, even though it is self-compacting, to get a minimum level of impermeability. If you actually do some additional compaction, we can get all the way down to 10 to the negative 10 centimeters per second hydraulic conductivity. So really high performance material there, and very resilient, non-degrading, even self-healing. So it resists seismic forces and degradation from freeze thaw cycles as well. So this is what we consider to be the next level bentonite. How do we do it? What does it look like? And I told you it has that resemblance of that kind of chocolate covered peanut, if you will. So a 1/4 to 3/4 inch average particle size in its dry state, with the powdered bentonite, which is very stable, adhered to the polymer binder, not going to chip or flake off. And then it expands when hydrated. And people ask me, well, does it just, expand like a foam or kind of blow up? And no, what it does is, if it's got a confining pressure around it in a, kind of a confining box or trench or area like that, then the bentonite is going to swell to the voids of the aggregate or the gravel and compact the whole mass together. You can see those pictures on the bottom left where, right after it gets hydrated versus 24 hours, you can see that swell, but you can also see where it fills up in those voids within the entire mass. And then you see what it kind of looks like, a very natural appearance when placed at the bottom of a pond. So let's go back to regular bentonite, and where is this bentonite presumably better? Well, in cutoff walls and cutoff trenches, we can actually just pour this material right into the cutoff trench without having to do a slurry mixture, without having to deal with all the mess. So in smaller cutoff trenches for hydraulic barriers and preventing seepage, AquaBlok can be a really, really easy and much less messy solution for your applications. Looking down at the bottom of the page there, you see on the right where bentonite is going in and being conditioned and mixed into the soil to make that soil less impervious or less pervious. Then you see what we do on the left there, we're actually using a conveyor or a telebelt and just slinging that bentonite coated gravel, the AquaBlock, right on the pond. So much easier to place in a pond lining or sealing solution. One of the applications I'm going to focus on today are on the top right in the trench dams and anti-seep collars. So we'll talk a little bit about piping, the phenomenon of piping, where water is going to find a preferential path through uncompacted soil, especially around complex shapes like pipes where it's difficult to compact the soil. That's where water finds its way through and causes major problems with underground seepage. So trench plugs, cut off walls, anti-seep collars, there's a dozen different names for them, but they can be much easier and faster to install using AquaBlock versus compacting soil and placing it around a pipe, or doing a sand bentonite mixture, or even pouring concrete into a form around a pipe. So for trench dams and anti-seep collars, it really is an advantageous material. So that's the AquaBlock solution. That's the AquaBlock Advantage. The bentonite, the sodium bentonite combined with the gravel, our secret sauce, the non-toxic proprietary binder, creates that composite bentonite aggregate material. It's low permeability, self-compacting, very simple and rapid to install. We can deliver it precisely where it needs to go. And I mean precisely, meaning that it can be dropped right on the area that needs to be plugged or sealed, and not have to worry about moving a liquid mass of something else into an area that's not as predictable to get there. Very easy to deliver. We deliver in 2 bulk bag sizes that we sell through distributors like ASP and Quick Supply, Bowman, and Cascade. We also have smaller 50-pound bags for kind of homeowner usage or smaller projects that are sold through those distributors as well. And we're manufactured in Swanton, Ohio, right outside of Toledo, and we have some very stringent quality control standards for the manufacture of this material. So this is AquaBlock, and I'm going to go into some of the performance properties, some of the applications, and then show a couple projects where it's been used. So let's talk about properties for performance. Why do we make AquaBlock the way it is? What about it makes it conducive for civil infrastructure projects and geotechnical applications? And some of the key geotechnical properties of AquaBlock that I'll go into a little bit are, how we build it, how we make it, its dry states characteristics. The key property for performance, because what it's made to do is to block water, hence the name AquaBlock. So permeability is a key property. Shear strength and bearing capacity are also kind of bonus properties, if you will, that go along with it. The way we achieve these properties for performance are through some very specific things. Reliable raw material sourcing. So we source right out of the Lovell area of Wyoming for our bentonite. We have a very consistent manufacturing process with a very good quality control plan and processes to get there, and some very good technical expertise in our lab and our plan as well. We've been making this product for over 20 years. Legacy applications for AquaBlock are more in the contamination remediation industry, and so we've used AquaBlock as a kind of a sequestration cap for a lot of contaminated sediments. So we've been making it a long time, and probably for the last 10 years, we focused it more on some of the geotechnical applications that would be out of the environmental contamination or remediation type industry, and more into the civil infrastructure industry. Want to focus a little bit about those properties that I talked about and dry state characteristics. Bulk density is a very important ASTM standard that we follow to make sure that we're using the proper, very precise concentration of bentonite per stone. So our main product, we call it a 2080 FW, and the 2080 means 20% bentonite, 80% stone by volume, and the FW stands for fresh water. So that's the bulk of our applications. We do make a saltwater material as well. We use it more in the remediation space, but 2080 FW is the kind of model name, if you will, for our standard AquaBlock product. I talked about permeability, and hydraulic conductivity is the main ASTM standard that we follow to be able to get results of 10 to the minus 7, 10 to the minus 8, all the way to 10 to the minus 10 centimeters per second in hydraulic conductivity. So you can ensure that when you're placing this as a hydraulic barrier, that it's performing the way it needs to perform. Shear strength as well, and I think I might have got cut off there on the bottom a little bit, but sorry about that. Didn't mean to advance that yet. But you know, using the product and some of its friction coefficient characteristics on slopes is very important, because we will use it on 3-to-1 and 4-to-1, sometimes even steeper than 3-to-1 slopes on sides of ponds and basins. So we have to know exactly what in our triaxial and shear testing, we will know exactly what we're going to get in terms of shear stress and friction coefficient. And then bearing capacity. So we actually have the bonus of having a gravel component as part of this bentonite mixture, so we can provide some resistance to loading. So if it's being used in an anti-seep collar or a trench dam that's under pavement, then we actually have the ability to provide some resistance to loading, whereas you might not have that with you know, a weaker low strength material that's being used for that application. So where should AquaBlock be used now that we know a little bit about it? And I would say generically in the top left slide, anywhere where low permeability is required. So I talked about, you know, our legacy application of sequestration, isolation, capping, but we're trying to keep water from moving from one substrate to the other. So whether that's preventing seepage through into the groundwater, or sometimes preventing seepage from contaminated groundwater into non-contaminated surface water. So where low permeability is required, AquaBlock can create that low permeable medium. We've actually used it to repair synthetic liner. Sometimes in lined ponds with plastic liner, UV resistance can cause liners to degrade prematurely. And instead of going in and ripping out entire sections of plastic liner, fixing subgrade and going back and putting in new liner, or even repairing existing liner with extrusion welding, we can go in and actually do a layer of AquaBlock on top of broken or ripped liner and get it back to the permeability standards, which is usually 10 to the negative 7 centimeters per second that it was required to be in certain applications. So as a repair technique over synthetic liner, AquaBlock can be a really valuable material. Anywhere where lateral groundwater flow needs to be stopped, and we're talking about vertical hydraulic barriers here. So this picture here in the third over from the left on the top row is actually a wastewater treatment lagoon where they've had some seepage issues. And instead of going in there and lining that and taking out all the stone and emptying that pond, it was as simple as digging about an 8-foot deep trench, cutoff trench, and filling that about a bucket width, and then filling that with AquaBlock and creating an in-place impermeable hydraulic barrier. So think sheet pile, but much, much easier and less expensive to install in a situation like that. Top right over on the top row, around structures of dams and spillways, where it's very, very important to prevent leakage from concrete joints or pipe penetrations, and AquaBlock can be used there. We'll talk definitely more about anti-seep collars and trench dams in the bottom left picture there. Definitely the material of choice, I believe, for using it in critical anti-seep collar scenarios where pond liners are too difficult to install. So again, installing synthetic liners, good practice for ponds that are easy to get a very smooth subgrade, very easy to dewater. But when you have a nasty pond with a lot of muck in it that's not easy to dewater, where it's not easy to remove rock or vegetation or get it smooth, it's going to be very difficult to install a synthetic liner, and AquaBlock can be a much better alternative. And then the last two pictures on the bottom row, utility and basically natural infrastructure structures are in needs of repair all the time. So backfilling in utility trenches and whatnot, repairing manholes, repairing drainage structures, repairing pipes, even repairing damage from wildlife, burrowing wildlife. So AquaBlok, sometimes we refer to it as nature's duct tape, and we can actually use it for a lot of repair applications. I want to go into two key applications that are referred to in the last slide, and we're going to talk about some case studies with both of those. But the first one being pond lining, sealing, capping, and closure. So like I said, in areas where synthetic liner is difficult to install, but a lot of times we'll use AquaBlok as sort of a patch or seal material. So maybe you have a pond that was originally built with clay material, but unfortunately there's a lens of bedrock or limestone or even well-drained sandy material, and that pond just can't hold water. It doesn't warrant an entire clay liner to be installed, and it doesn't warrant the entire synthetic liner to be installed, but there may be some areas that just need to be patched. What's great about AquaBlok in this application is that, believe it or not, AquaBlok can be installed very, very easily in the water column. So you see those pictures on the top where we're not even draining the pond to be able to get AquaBlok installed. So think about all these applications where you've got water leaking from a pond, don't know exactly where it is, but very, very difficult to drain that pond to get it fixed. And AquaBlok can be a great product to use for that. Pictures on the bottom where we actually did full scale application of AquaBlok across the bottom and side slopes of the pond. And so this can be, AquaBlok can be a great alternative to a imported clay liner that could be, 24 inches thick sometimes. And if you think about the cost to import clay from a borrow source that may be, more than 100 miles away from a site, AquaBlok can be a very, very easy to install, a less expensive alternative to that. So along those lines, I want to show you a case study that we did, AquaBlok installation in Columbus, Ohio. This is actually the Franklin Park Pond and Cascades in downtown Columbus, and it was the site of a festival, of a flower festival many, many years ago, where they came in and actually built a hydraulic system. They had an upper pond and a lower pond, and a kind of a system of cascading waterfalls through the middle of it, and a pretty substantial pump system to be able to move that water, recycle that water from the bottom to the top and run it down through those cascades. So it was built in 1991, but since 2016, it just kind of degraded and the cascades started leaking water. The pump systems just was inoperable. They went in and did a pretty substantial, expensive upgrade to the pump system, but just didn't have the water because it had all leaked through lenses of sandy material and couldn't hold in its original footprint of pond and cascades. So they evaluated some different materials to use, and synthetic liner was definitely one of the materials. But if you look at that picture, the difficulty of getting all that rock and shaping that area to be able to install synthetic liner would have been tough. All those stepstone cascades being removed would have been extremely difficult to be able to take those out, put liner in, and then put those back, and then worry about damaging your liner when you actually reinstall those cascades. So AquaBlok was chosen for its performance, its ease of installation without having to disturb different areas for anchor trenches and things like that. So you can see some of the prep pictures there on the picture on the left. They went in and did a little bit of regrading, put some kind of extruded curb type material and concrete around some of the flow paths, did some repairs to the cascades and waterfalls, and then brought the AquaBlok in. Now you can see those white bags, those super sacks, is what AquaBlok is delivered in, and we can deliver those in 2,400 or 2,700 pound super sacks for that material. So application was really easy. In that picture on the left, we actually put it in a conveyor belt we called a stone slinger, and filled up the hopper in the back of that truck with those bags of AquaBlock. You can see them being dumped in, and just shot that out. So if you got a good slinger operator, you can cover the areas that you need to seal in just a matter of hours. And for pond applications like this, the standard thickness of AquaBlock is about 2 inches. We can get by with about 1.5 inches, and that'll seal to a permeability of 1 to the -7, 1 times 10 to the -7. So if you apply it at 2 inches, you're pretty much insured to get 1.5 coverage. And then it's just a little bit of manual work, as you can see down there on the bottom right, where you're kind of just raking it and pulling it into areas. And we sort of mix the AquaBlock in around different areas of decorative stone and riprap and things like that, up against the extruded curbs in some of these waterways.
Andy, I'm clicking on the Q&A just real quick. I didn't want to take away controls from you. We're about halfway through, and we've got a few questions. Do you want those now, or do you want to wait till the end?
How about I finish just these couple slides on the pond application, and then we'll answer those before we go into the trench dams.
Perfect, thanks.
Okay. So I talked again about if you talk about installing synthetic liners, if you look on that picture on the top left, that's what liner crews will not go in and install in, where you have just nasty kind of muck bottoms and smooth side slopes. So being able to park your slinger in there and cover all those areas was a real benefit to the installation. And you can see some of the other areas where the AquaBlock was installed as well. So here is a, oh, sorry, I need to take control again. My bad. Here is, oh, I'm trying here, Bill. Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Here's a picture of, I got it now.
Do you got it? I think I just had to click the Q&A off. I think you got to do it again. Sorry about that.
Oh, that's okay.
I was doing behind the scenes stuff.
Okay, so here's a picture of right after the AquaBlock is installed, and you can see it kind of blends in with the pond bottom there with some of the decorative rock up in the upper area of the pond. And then you can see this picture here. This was several months later, where the pond has started to fill back up. And then here's some of the pictures, as time goes on, and you can see, the pond is full again, and the water is now flowing through those cascades. And then I took these pictures over the summer. So really, really nice. It kind of restored this this aquatic ecosystem, if you will, back to its original design, kind of appearance and functionality, and it's sort of been a signature project for AquaBlock. So great project, and we can use that in a lot of similar applications. So I'm going to move into trench dams and anti-seep collars, but before I do, Bill, if you've got some questions you want to ask me, I'd certainly be happy to answer them at this point.
I do. It'll be a little bit of back and forth on the controls, because sometimes when I click on
that's
these,
fine.
it takes away control from you. So
sure.
Donald attends almost all of our webinars, and he asks, how do you keep and store the bentonite in bags dry prior to placement? If compromised with moisture, what problems, if any?
Yeah, great question, Donald. So definitely have to keep those, keep the bags dry. So in those super sacks, we close the bag up at the top, but we definitely tarp it and transport. And then when they're stored, if they can't be stored indoors, we definitely need to have some good tarping over it while it's been stored outdoors. Now, we will deliver on pallets, so that'll keep it up out of, saturated ground, but you definitely don't want to store it in any standing water. And you definitely want to have some tarping over it before it gets used. But if you do that and you do it right, then, you can leave it outside for several months before it needs to be used.
And our salespeople are very, very comfortable with this. We carry it in a lot of our branches, and our guys are really good at telling the contractor that picks it up how to take care of it. So we've not had any trouble. A little concerned on timing here, Andy. So we got to keep an eye on time so that we stay in the hour. But
yeah, absolutely. So we're gonna finish up with some more Q&A in about 10 minutes. Is that right?
Yep. Do you want any more of these questions now, or do you want to get through some of your
give me
slides?
one more, I guess. That'd be good.
So Dennis asks, do you recommend compacting the material for certain applications? And I know you're going to talk specifically about this. What percentage of compaction do you recommend?
Well, that's a good question, Dennis. And we certainly don't We don't recommend compacting unless there's a need to get it to a certain permeability. So we can go in with you and look at some of the blow counts, some of the compaction requirements with respect to permeability. And with just a little bit of compaction, we can take 10 to the -7 or 10 to the -8 to 10 to the 9 or 10 to the -10. So depending on what you need it to do. And I would say for most applications in pond sealing and lining, even anti-seep collars, you really don't need that much. So compaction isn't required, but it can be compacted and it can perform better. So
All right.
definitely based on a case-by-case scenario.
Thanks, Andy. So you click on that screen or hit the space bar and
Yeah.
you'll be driving again. Thanks.
All right, so let's talk about trench dams and anti-seep collars, because here's where AquaBlok can be a great advantage. So using it for these applications, principal spillways through dams and stormwater ponds, oil, gas pipelines, lots of utility construction, storm sewer outfalls, large box culverts. Sometimes they can be, depending on the municipality, regulatory district, can be a pretty frequent placement criteria for these anti-seep collars. But it can be very, very easy to install, no compaction required. And it's just easy to pour in, do it in multiple lifts if need be. Want to give you an example here. So here's some example design specifications, if you will. A lot of times these anti-seep collars will be called out as something else, like a bentonite clay dam, if you will, over on the profile drawing. And then you'll see the specification down below. It says every 300 linear feet, but yet you're seeing those dams spaced a little bit tighter than that. 3 feet below the final finished grade, and that contradicts the detail a little bit. So you want to be careful if you're a contractor looking at these plans, or civil engineer designing and specifying. And we make it easy for you. And Bill and his team can give you these, but this is our typical detail and our specification language. So we even put in some criteria for how thick the anti-seep collar should be based on pipe diameter, how high it should be, the dimensions around it, based on what kind of cover is going to be over it, and then probably most importantly, the spacing of it based on the type of utility, the type of grade, the type of soil. So it always is preempted by what the engineer will design. But if the engineer needs some guidance on this, we're certainly happy to help with our standard specifications and details. So here's a couple application examples. This was a anti-seep collar done on a large water transmission line for the San Francisco Water Authority. And just want to show this. This was a little bit overkill in the form. The form does not have to be this elaborate to be able to put the AquaBlok in. But if you do, this is what we really don't want to see. Do not pull the form away before you backfill the trench. Fortunately, they had hydrated AquaBlok enough where it actually stands, and I think this is a testament to the strength of the material. But it actually stood without having the support of the backfill trench there. So that's just one example of where it was used. This was a project that we recently did in Ohio with a lot of seepage going through some sewer laterals. And I just want to show you how easy it was to form this up. They actually used some drywall to keep a little box there to be able to put the AquaBlok in, and just put the AquaBlok right in from the bucket, and then was able to cover up around that lateral and prevent that seepage, at the edge of the trench box there in this application. But this is the signature project that we want to talk about. So this was Cascade Geosynthetics, and Travis Reel, who was going to be on with us today, but got called out to some meetings. And this was a project that he and his team worked on, sold through a contractor up in the Pacific Northwest called Tappanee. So they had a lot of steep grades and aging underground infrastructure, and really had to move quickly to get these anti-seep collars installed. And the design and specification was a bentonite dam. So it was a pretty generic bentonite specification, which would have required a lot of mixing and compaction of that material. You can see the steep slope on this 24-inch water line, and these trench dams were in some places spaced pretty close together in the trench. So we're looking at that. But here's the thing, and I want to talk about this in a minute. AquaBlok, well, we submitted this as a VE, value engineered proposal, to substitute for just standard bentonite, and the engineer was happy to accept it, and so was the municipality. So what the contractor did, and this was ingenious, was actually fabricate this form, this reusable and movable form. So they actually put hooks on it, and were able to pull it out and just set it right over the 24-inch water line, drop it down, and then fill the AquaBlok right into it, and then pull the form out and move it to the next spot and just pour the AquaBlok in. This was the key, the key value proposition for this project. We're able to just empty that bag suspended from the loader right into that movable trench dam form. Just a matter of seconds. So this was an actual quote from Cascade's contractor customer. He said that they've been doing these trench dams, and it's a process that they usually takes them about an hour to do each time they go in, and that's probably a quick one. He said that now that he's got AquaBlok to do this, he's reduced what is taking an hour down to 11 seconds using AquaBlok. So very, very happy about how easy it was to install and get these things going. I want to show a couple more pictures there of the construction. You can see that form there going over the water line. But here's a video that Travis put together. It looks like it's going a little bit slow, a little bit of latency there, but you can get the idea of it. It's just dropping the form right over. Now, the key to this is what they figured out in doing this was that they went in and placed the form in, and then they poured the AquaBlok into the form and actually hydrated the AquaBlok. I'm sorry, they did not hydrate the AquaBlok. They actually poured it in. They backfilled the trench first, and then they pulled the form out before they've got any water on the AquaBlok. And what they found was it was much easier to remove the form when it was still a little bit dry. But then the saturated soils and the water that they put on it got the AquaBlok to hydrate and set very, very easily after that was pulled. Great project, and now Cascade is looking at doing several more of these with different contractors up in the Pacific Northwest. So just a testament to how great the product has worked for them, and believe it can work just as well for ASP and Quick Supply and Bowman and other places as well. So to wrap it up, these are the delivery options for AquaBlok. We do it in 50-pound bags, and 50-pound bag does not go a long way. That would be just plugging some very small, maybe animal damage holes. But the 24 and 2,700-pound bulk bags, we can fit 18 of the 2,400-pound bags on a truck and 16 on the of the 2,700 pounds on a truck. Now, those can be purchased directly from your distributor in the area, ASP, Bowman, Quick Supply, or Cascade. We can work with them to drop ship directly to the job site sometimes as well. Like we talked about, a very easy installation. If you've got the ability to put it in to a bucket and drop it in directly, that's fine. The telebelt slinger installation for broadcast over a pond is the best way to do that. And then just simply dropping it in right to the into the cutoff trench or the repair area or the trench dam is easy to do as well. Lastly, if we get into some very large jobs, we're talking about huge flood control structures, things like that, we actually can and have been able to go out and set up remote batch plants at the job site itself. Now, we'll still work with the distributor to make this happen, but it cuts down on the shipping, and we can import the materials directly to the job site and make the material. So we actually make our technology mobile in these types of situations. So that's all I've got, Bill, but I certainly would love to answer some more questions if
yeah, for sure. So before I go on to my closing slides that just wrap this up, I'll pull up the Q&A, and you already answered a couple of good ones. And I don't know if you'll see these questions appear on screen, so let me read them to you.
Sure.
Mark asks, do you have any thermal conductivity values? Does that ever come up? I've never heard of it.
Thermal conductivity values, no, Mark. I'll have to go back and look at that. Now I'm trying to think of what context here. In terms of resistance to freeze thaw cycles.
Maybe he could
We're not.
elaborate. Maybe we can get back to it. We'll ask Mark if he wants to add anything to that, because I've never heard that question.
Yeah. I'd like
Dennis
to know
asked,
a little bit more about that.
is it cost competitive with granular bentonite in dry installations?
That's a good question. So, you have to look at it apples to apples. Granular bentonite comes in smaller packages and less of it can be used, but yet it has to be mixed with something. It has to be mixed with water, soil, placed and compacted. So pound for pound, our material is going to be more expensive than granular bentonite. But if you look at the total mixed cost to install, you're going to find in some applications, ours can be, AquaBlock can be much less expensive than installing bentonite. But a bag of powder bentonite is going to be cheaper than an equivalent bag of AquaBlock.
And I like how you described that, though, because it does have to be mixed. It's kind of like with
Right.
there's a lot of solutions that have to have other things done with them or some other products added. So you got to consider the total package and the effectiveness.
That's right. We're a system, an aggregate system versus components that have to be assembled, if you will.
And you mentioned this, but he's asked the question, and maybe it varies, but how thick are your liner applications?
Yeah, so good question again. Standard typical for a freshwater pond that we're preventing seepage through. If you apply 2 inches, you're going to get a consistent 1.5 inch thickness, and that's what you want. I don't know that I'd feel real comfortable going much less than that. Certainly don't need to go more, although we will do some pretty thick applications for sequestration if we have contamination below. But on average, a 2-inch layer is going to do the job.
And Mary heard you mention the 50-pound bags, and she said, has this been used to waterproof drainage trenches around individual houses?
Absolutely. So lots of neat homeowner applications. We use it for kind of like structure sealing. We have even used it for foundation waterproofing as well in certain situations. But, we get homeowner calls all the time where, there's a leaking drain tile or something like that needs to be plugged, or, gutter downspouts, leaders, things like that. So if you can imagine it from a repair standpoint, we've either done it or we can figure out a way to do it. So good question there.
It looks like we're doing really good on time. Martin Cleveland asks, will vegetation grow through the AquaBlock?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It depends on the vegetation, but a lot of times we do see some growth through it. I wouldn't equate it to potting soil or anything like that, but it certainly is going to be able to accommodate some vegetative growth. And depending on where it's used and what it's used for. So for instance, as sealing a pond and you wanted to actually have some aquatic vegetation be able to get through, then you certainly would be able to accommodate that with AquaBlock, whereas you'd have a tough time doing that with a thick clay liner. So yes, and we can get into more specifics about that, if you've got a specific application that you want to look at.
Well, and you mentioned, because somebody asked it on when to hydrate, and I've heard you talk about this before, but are there different times where you would hydrate, at a different point of the installation?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I probably didn't go into that as much as I should have. So, essentially it needs to be hydrated, generically speaking. So that said, if you're installing it into a saturated condition, if you're installing it in to a trench or a trench dam application where you've already got a high water table, then it's gonna hydrate on its own. Okay, where we recommend some manual hydration is primarily where you're putting it into lifts, Bill. So if you've got a larger form for a trench dam or anti-seep collar, and it's going to take 3 bags of AquaBlok to fill that, we would highly recommend that you call each bag a lift, and then go in and do about 20 gallons per cubic yard of water per per lift. So a bag is, let's say a bag is about a cubic yard, so a 20-gallon hydration. And we don't want to just pour the water in, we just want to kind of spray it lightly, and then do the next lift, spray it lightly again, do the next lift, and spray it one more time. So we're just kind of kick-starting the hydration a little bit. Eventually, any kind of water presence, moisture presence is going to hydrate it to its full, full swell index, but you want to get it started. So that's a great question.
So it makes it sound like you're trying to consistently hydrate it through the product. So it's a homogeneous mix.
That's right. And you're just, and the only reason is you're going to get to your highest performance quicker if you start to get that consistent hydration through it as it's being installed.
That's awesome. Thank you.
And good segue here. What I'd like to do for anybody that's on the call today is make our standard, our manufacturer's recommended installation guidelines available. We've just updated those for 2021, and it's got all that information in it. So I certainly can get those to you, Bill, that you can disseminate to everybody that's on the call today.
Perfect timing. We could do that with the PDH certificate. So everybody that sends back that Survey Monkey, they can get the standard installation guidelines 2021. That's awesome. Thanks, Andy, for offering that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, it looks like we're a little bit ahead of time, and that's okay. I think you and you mentioned that Travis, I talked to him this morning. He was wanting to be on here, but he couldn't. He's at a meeting with somebody off-site or on-site. His project in particular, he did a presentation for us in-house and has a lot of our salespeople across our companies really interested. So
yeah,
if anybody already has a relationship with somebody, ASP, Quick, Bowman, or Cascade, and they want to call them, we're ready. And all of our companies are very familiar with Andy Durham, and we can talk to him and get him involved. But we're ready to not only answer their questions, but to maybe host some presentations like this. That instead of a webinar, it would be a Zoom meeting where we could have Andy be on with your company. And for all of these attendees, they could get their contractor, they could get their friends and neighbors, whoever they wanted, and we could set up a Zoom meeting where they could interact with you live.
Yeah, that'd be great. That would be great.
Okay, so we have
I'd
your
love
contact
to do that. I'd
information
be
on
happy
there.
to do it.
Okay.
And I just can't say enough about the great job that Travis did to be able to go to that contractor, be able to explain how AquaBlok can really be a cost savings to them, and then made it happen. And the contractor was tickled about how much time they saved in using that product. So that's the kind of service that you guys, provide, is going out and finding ways to help contractors save time and money.
And thank you for saying that, because we do try to be their trusted site solutions provider. So I'm going to show on screen right here just the phone number and website for each of our 4 companies. But this is being recorded as well, and we're going to put it on our YouTube channel. But I think nothing beats just getting it straight from the horse's mouth. So contact us and your local sales rep, and we can get Andy on there again. Like I said, instead of a Zoom webinar, it'd be a Zoom meeting, so we could share screen back and forth. If they had project photos they wanted to show, you've already proven you can handle some real complicated, interesting projects.
And we'd love to do more with you guys.
Yeah, I think you will. Thanks, Andy. So for the attendees, please continue to stay tuned. We're going to try to do these every week. I know the weather's getting better, thank goodness, and a lot of people are getting outside, but we're going to keep doing these webinars every week on Wednesdays at the same time. Next week, we'll have Presto Geosolutions with us. After that, Profile Products. I've got a few people competing to get in with us on March 24th. And FODs are good for construction site entrances in all markets, no matter what kind of project you have. That's going to be done in-house by some of our own sales guys. So, Andy, with that, I think we'll go ahead and just wrap it up a few minutes early in hopes that everybody fills out the Survey Monkey, and I'll share all that contact information with you, Andy. Great job. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, thank you, Bill. Really appreciate it, and hope to help you guys out wherever we can.
All right. Take care, buddy.